Maria Chen was folding laundry in the modest apartment she called home when her phone buzzed with a text from her husband. Got caught in meetings all day.
Have dinner without me?
She sighed, placing a neatly folded t-shirt on the pile. Being married to one of the richest men in the country meant getting used to eating alone more often than she'd like. She glanced around their apartment, which many found surprising. Despite James Chen's net worth of billions, they lived in a comfortable but ordinary 3-bedroom apartment in the city. It had been Maria's idea. "We don't need a mansion," she had insisted when they married 15 years ago. "What would we do with all those empty rooms?" James had laughed at that, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way she loved. Most women would be picking out chandeliers before the ink dried on the marriage certificate. "I'm not most women," she had replied. And that was true in more ways than one. Maria had met James long before his tech company exploded into the business phenomenon it was today. Back then, he was just another ambitious programmer with big dreams, working out of a garage with 2 college friends. She had been waitressing at the diner where he came for coffee every morning, always ordering the same thing, black coffee and wheat toast. "You're going to waste away eating like that," she had teased him one morning, sliding an egg onto his plate on the house. Their love story had been simple and sweet. When James sold his first major software package and the money started flowing in, Maria had been happy for him but insisted they keep their lives grounded. "Money changes people," she'd told him. "Let's not let it change us." And somehow they'd managed that balancing act all these years. James had his company and his billions, but when he came home he was still the same man who once counted pennies for his morning coffee. And Maria, despite having access to unlimited shopping sprees and luxury, still clipped coupons and took the bus. It drove their financial advisor crazy. "What's the point of having money if you live like you don't?" he would ask during their annual meetings. Maria always smiled at that. "The point is having the freedom to choose how we live." Looking at her phone again, Maria decided she wasn't in the mood to cook. There was that new restaurant everyone had been talking about, Le Prestige. The food critic from the local paper had raved about their French-Asian fusion menu, and Maria loved trying new cuisines. She pulled up the restaurant's website on her tablet. The prices made her wince, $75 for an appetizer, but she and James had an agreement. Their daily lives were modest, but they allowed themselves occasional splurges, especially for experiences rather than things. Maria dialed the number, half expecting they'd be fully booked. "Le Prestige, how may I assist you?" a polished voice answered. "Hi, I was wondering if you might have a table for one this evening." There was a pause. "For one?" The voice sounded slightly less warm. "Yes, just for me." "Your name?" Maria hesitated. It was a habit she'd developed over the years. Using her maiden name meant being treated like a normal person, not like the wife of James Chen, tech billionaire. "Maria Wong," she said, one moment, the sound of computer keys clicking. "We have a cancellation. We can seat you at 7:30. "That would be perfect, thank you." After hanging up, Maria went to her closet. Unlike many wealthy women, she didn't have a wardrobe full of designer labels. Her clothes were well made but simple. She selected a navy blue dress that she'd owned for years, comfortable flats, and a cardigan in case the restaurant was chilly. Her jewelry box contained several expensive pieces James had given her for anniversaries and birthdays, but she rarely wore them except for special occasions. Tonight she chose a simple pearl necklace, her grandmother's, and the small diamond studs James had given her when they were still practically broke, and the diamonds were so tiny they were almost invisible. Maria applied light makeup and pulled her long black hair into a neat bun. Looking in the mirror, she saw a woman in her early 40s who could blend into any crowd. Not glamorous, not attention-seeking, just herself. Before leaving, she texted James back. "Going to try that new place, Le Prestige. We'll bring you leftovers if it's as good as they say." His reply came quickly. "Enjoy. Call if you need a ride home." Maria smiled. James always worried about her taking public transportation at night, but she'd been navigating the city on her own since college. She tucked her phone into her small handbag, grabbed her transit card, and headed out. The early evening air was pleasant as Maria walked to the bus stop. She could have called a car service, James had accounts with all of them, but she enjoyed these moments of normalcy. On the bus, she watched the city roll by, observing fellow passengers, each with their own stories. Le Prestige was located in the renovated Arts District, an area that had once been all warehouses and has since become the trendiest part of the city. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of a beautifully restored brick building, with a subtle sign in elegant gold lettering. As Maria approached, she noticed the clientele arriving in luxury cars, women in designer dresses, men in tailored suits. For a moment, she felt a flicker of self-consciousness about her simple outfit, but she pushed it aside. Good food was good food, regardless of what you wore to eat it. The maitre d' looked up as she entered, his eyes quickly scanning her appearance. "Do you have a reservation?" he asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. "Yes, for 7:30. Wong." He checked his tablet, his expression shifting subtly. "Ah, the single diner. We're quite busy tonight. There will be a slight wait." Maria nodded and moved to the small waiting area. Several couples arrived after her, but were promptly escorted to tables. After 20 minutes, she approached the podium again. "Excuse me, I notice others have been seated. Is there a problem with my reservation?" The maitre d' looked up, barely concealing his annoyance. "As I mentioned, we're very busy. The table we had planned for you needed to be repurposed for a larger party." Just then, a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit emerged from the dining room. His commanding presence and the way the staff straightened as he appeared marked him as someone important. "Is there an issue, Felipe?" he asked the maitre d'. "No issue, Mr. Dumont. Just explaining to this lady that we're accommodating larger parties first." The man, clearly Antoine Dumont, the owner, looked Maria over with an appraising glance that made her feel like an item on a discount rack. "I see," he said coolly. "And you are dining alone, miss?" "Mrs. Wong," Maria corrected gently. "And yes, just me tonight." Antoine exchanged a look with Philippe. "We can find a place for Mrs. Wong," he said, his tone making it clear this was a concession rather than a welcome. The table by the kitchen should be available. The worst table in the house, Maria thought, but she simply smiled. "Thank you." As Philippe led her through the dining room, Maria couldn't help noticing the subtle glances from other diners. Her simple dress stood out among the designer labels and flashy jewelry. The table she was shown to was indeed right next to the swinging kitchen doors, where servers rushed in and out, and the noise level was significantly higher than in the rest of the elegant space. "Your server will be with you shortly," Philippe said, dropping the menu on the table rather than handing it to her. Maria took a deep breath and opened the menu. The prices were even higher than listed online, but she reminded herself this was an occasional splurge. She had just decided on her selections when she overheard Antoine speaking to a server nearby, not bothering to lower his voice. "Remember, table 14 is just a single. Don't waste too much time there. Focus on the clients who actually matter." Maria felt her cheeks warm but kept her eyes on the menu. She'd encountered this kind of treatment before, people who judged solely on appearances, who couldn't see past designer labels and expensive watches. A young server eventually approached, looking slightly harried. "Are you ready to order?" he asked, without introducing himself or mentioning specials as she'd heard him do at other tables. "Yes," Maria said kindly, understanding he was probably just following instructions. "I'll have the scallop appetizer and the duck breast main course, please." The server scribbled down her order without comment. "Anything to drink?" "Just water's fine for now." "Thank you." As he walked away, Maria heard Antoine again, this time speaking to an elegantly dressed couple he was personally escorting to their table, a table in the center of the restaurant, with perfect lighting and a beautiful view of the restaurant's ornate fountain. "We save our best tables for our best customers," he was saying, his voice warm and ingratiating. "At Le Prestige, we believe in recognizing quality." Maria smiled to herself. If only he knew who she was married to. James would find this situation hilarious. He always did when people underestimated her. But that wasn't why she was here. She was here for the supposedly transcendent duck breast and the famous chocolate soufflé. And regardless of where they seated her or how they treated her, she would form her own opinion about whether the food lived up to the hype. Because in the end, that's what really mattered. Not the glitz, not the status, but the substance underneath. It was a philosophy that had guided both her life and her marriage. Look past the surface to what truly counts. Maria took a sip of her water and settled in to wait for her meal, already looking forward to telling James about her evening when she got home. 20 minutes passed before Maria's appetizer arrived. The server placed the dish on the table without a word and hurried away. Maria looked down at the 3 tiny scallops arranged artfully on the large white plate. They were beautifully seared, surrounded by dots of colorful sauces and topped with microgreens. The presentation was certainly impressive, but for $75, she had expected something a bit more substantial. She took a bite and had to admit the flavor was excellent, perfectly cooked with a delicate balance of sweetness and umami. As she savored her appetizer, the kitchen doors swung open again and Antoine Dumont emerged, speaking loudly to someone following behind him. "The supplier swears these are the best black truffles available right now, but I'm not convinced," he was saying. "They lack the aroma I expect. We may need to adjust the price of the truffle risotto if the quality doesn't improve." His eyes swept across the restaurant, pausing briefly on Maria's table. His expression changed subtly, a mix of annoyance and dismissal. He leaned toward the man beside him, clearly the chef based on his white coat, and said something in a lower voice. The chef glanced at Maria and nodded. Maria pretended not to notice, focusing on her food instead. She was used to being overlooked or dismissed based on her appearance. It had happened throughout her 15 years of marriage to James. People saw her simple clothes and natural face and made assumptions. It used to bother her, but over time, she'd come to see it as a filter, a way to identify people who valued substance over style. After finishing her appetizer, Maria waited nearly 40 minutes for her main course to arrive. She observed as tables seated after hers received their food much more quickly. Couples in designer clothes and flashy jewelry were being treated to tableside presentations and personal visits from the chef. Antoine moved from table to table, chatting warmly with select guests, never approaching her corner. When her duck breast finally arrived, it was lukewarm. The server practically dropped the plate in front of her and disappeared before she could ask for another glass of water. The duck was beautifully cooked, still pink in the middle with crispy skin, but it had clearly been sitting under a heat lamp for too long. A commotion near the entrance caught Maria's attention. A group of 4 well-dressed people had arrived, and Antoine was personally greeting them with great enthusiasm. Based on their conversation, one of them was a food critic from a major publication. "Mr. Rivera, what an honor to have you dining with us tonight," Antoine gushed, clasping the man's hand in both of his. "We've prepared our finest table for you and your guests." Maria watched as the group was escorted to a prime table that had been conspicuously empty all evening, despite the restaurant's supposed full booking. The table was quickly adorned with complimentary champagne and special amuse-bouches that hadn't been offered to other diners. The contrast between their treatment and hers couldn't have been more stark. Maria cut another piece of her cooling duck and considered the situation. She knew she could easily change everything. One phone call to James, or even just mentioning his name, would transform the entire staff's behavior toward her. The thought made her smile. How quickly Antoine's dismissive attitude would change if he knew who she was married to. But that wasn't her way. Maria had always believed people should be treated with kindness and respect, regardless of their perceived status or wealth. She had worked as a waitress herself during college. She knew how hard the job could be and made a point of always being polite to service workers. What bothered her about tonight wasn't the poor treatment she was receiving, but the clear disparity in how people were valued based solely on appearances. "Is everything to your satisfaction?" a voice suddenly asked. Maria looked up to find a young woman in a server's uniform. Not her original server, but someone new. "The duck is cooked perfectly," Maria replied honestly, "though it's a bit cold." The server's face showed genuine concern. "I'm so sorry about that. Would you like me to take it back and have a fresh one prepared?" "No, that's not necessary. It's still quite good." The young woman hesitated, then lowered her voice. "I noticed you've been waiting a long time between courses." "I want to apologize for that." Maria smiled warmly at her. "It's not your fault. Thank you for checking on me. My name is Lisa, by the way. I'll be taking over your table for the rest of the evening." "Thank you, Lisa." "I'm Maria." As Lisa walked away, Maria noticed Antoine watching the interaction with narrowed eyes. When Lisa returned to the kitchen, he followed her. Through the briefly open kitchen door, Maria could hear his raised voice. "We don't waste time on table 14.
Haven't you been listening?
Focus on the critics' table and the corner booth with the tech investors." Maria couldn't hear Lisa's response, but When the young woman emerged from the kitchen, her cheeks were flushed with embarrassment. Still, she made a point of stopping by Maria's table again. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked, her voice steady despite the obvious dressing down she'd just received. "Just some water, please," Maria replied. "And maybe tell me about your dessert options when you have a moment." Lisa brought the water quickly and described the desserts with genuine enthusiasm, recommending the chocolate soufflé. "It needs to be ordered in advance because it takes 20 minutes to prepare, but it's worth the wait." Maria ordered the soufflé, and true to Lisa's word, it was spectacular when it finally arrived, perfectly risen with a warm, molten center that released a rich chocolate aroma when she broke through the top with her spoon. Throughout the meal, Maria continued to observe the restaurant's operations. Antoine's behavior was consistent, fawning over guests he deemed important while ignoring or actively dismissing others. The food critics table received elaborate presentations for each course, with the chef personally explaining each dish. The tech investors Antoine had mentioned were treated to complimentary wine pairings and extra courses, courtesy of the house. When it came time for the bill, Maria had to wait nearly 15 minutes before Lisa could bring it over, apologizing quietly for the delay. The total was just under $300 for her 3-course meal and a glass of wine. Exorbitant by normal standards, but not surprising for a restaurant of this caliber in this neighborhood. Maria took out her credit card, not the black card that would immediately identify her as Mrs. James Chen, but a regular card under her maiden name. She noticed Antoine watching from across the room as she handed the card to Lisa, his expression suggesting he was already calculating the minimal tip she would leave, further confirming his judgment of her. When Lisa returned with the receipt, Maria signed it and added a 30% tip. She knew from her own experience how servers often got the short end when it came to difficult tables, and Lisa had been kind despite the pressure from her boss. As Maria gathered her things to leave, Antoine approached her table, his face a practiced mask of professional courtesy that didn't reach his eyes. "I trust everything was satisfactory," he said, the statement more dismissive than inquiring. Maria looked up at him and smiled genuinely. "The food shows real talent in the kitchen. Your chef clearly has skill." Antoine seemed taken aback by her knowledgeable comment. "Yes, Chef Roland trained in Paris before." He stopped himself as if suddenly realizing he was giving too much information to someone he had deemed unimportant. "Well, we're glad you enjoyed it." "I particularly enjoyed the soufflé," Maria continued, "though I think the duck would have been even better had it been served hot." Antoine's expression hardened. "Perhaps you simply took too long to eat it." "Perhaps," Maria agreed mildly, standing to leave. "In any case, thank you for the experience. It was educational." As she walked toward the exit, Maria could feel Antoine's eyes on her back, likely relieved to see her go. She passed the food critics table, where the chef was presenting an elaborate dessert that wasn't on the regular menu. At the door, she paused to thank Lisa, who had appeared to bid her goodbye. "Thank you for your kindness," Maria told her. "It made a difference," Lisa smiled. "You're welcome back anytime, Mrs. Wong." Outside, the night air felt refreshing after the tense atmosphere of the restaurant. Maria decided to walk a few blocks before catching the bus home. She pulled out her phone to text James. "Food was good, but you wouldn't believe the service. Bringing you leftovers would have required a doggy bag, and I got the distinct impression that would have been frowned upon. Full story when I see you. Love you." His reply came quickly. "Can't wait to hear. Bad service makes for the best stories. Just landed, heading home now. Love you too." Maria smiled and tucked her phone away. James was right. Bad service did make for good stories, and something told her this particular story wasn't over yet. Maria arrived home to find James already there, his suit jacket tossed over the back of the couch and his tie loosened. He was in the kitchen making himself a sandwich. "There she is," he said with a warm smile when he saw her. "How was the fancy new restaurant?" Maria kicked off her shoes and patted across the hardwood floor to give him a kiss. The food was actually quite good. The owner, however, was something else entirely. James raised an eyebrow as he cut his sandwich in half. "Oh, do tell." Maria leaned against the counter and recounted her evening at Le Prestige, the long wait despite her reservation, the table by the kitchen doors, the cold food, and Antoine Dumont's obvious disdain. James listened, his expression darkening slightly. "You should have called me. Or at least used the black card." And miss seeing the look on his face when he realizes his mistake later? No way. Maria stole half of his sandwich with a grin. Besides, that's not the point. No one should be treated that way whether they're married to you or not. James shook his head, but he was smiling. This was so typical of Maria, the reason he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. While others were attracted to his growing wealth and status, she had always seen past all that to the person underneath. So what happens now? He asked, already knowing the answer. Nothing, Maria said simply. I had an overpriced meal, I left a good tip for the kind server, and that's that. James looked skeptical. That's it? No revenge plan? No desire to go back with me and watch the owner grovel when he realizes who you are? Maria laughed. What would be the point? People like that don't really change. They just adjust their behavior depending on who they think you are. She took another bite of the stolen sandwich. Besides, I'm not entirely convinced the food is worth a return visit despite the hype. Later that night, as they were getting ready for bed, James's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned slightly. It's Daniel, he said, referring to his assistant. At this hour it must be important. Maria nodded and continued removing her makeup while James took the call in the bedroom. She could hear his side of the conversation, mostly short responses and questions. When he returned, his expression was thoughtful. Everything okay? She asked. Yes and no, James replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. Remember that restaurant expansion deal we've been looking at? The one with the French chef who wants to open locations across the country. Maria nodded slowly, a feeling of coincidence creeping in. Don't tell me Antoine Dumont, James confirmed. That was Daniel calling to confirm our dinner meeting tomorrow night. Apparently Dumont has been pursuing our investment group for months. Tomorrow is the final pitch before we make our decision. Maria's eyes widened. At Le Prestige? Where else? James gave a short laugh. The universe has a sense of humor, doesn't it? Maria sat beside him, processing this information. What are you going to do? James shrugged. Go to the dinner, I suppose. Listen to his pitch like I planned. He glanced at her. The real question is, what are you going to do? Maria thought about it for a moment. Her natural instinct was to stay home and avoid the awkwardness altogether. But something about letting Antoine continue his two-faced behavior didn't sit right with her. I'll come with you, she decided, not for any dramatic confrontation, but because I want to see if the way he treats you is as different as I think it will be. James put his arm around her shoulders. You know, most people would be planning some elaborate revenge scenario right now. Maria leaned into him. I'm not most people. No, James agreed softly. You're definitely not. The next evening, Maria took more care with her appearance than usual. She chose a simple but elegant black dress that she'd worn to a charity event last year. It wasn't ostentatiously expensive looking, but it was perfectly tailored to her figure. She wore her grandmother's pearls again, but added the diamond bracelet James had given her for their 10th anniversary, a subtle hint of luxury that Antoine might or might not notice. James wore one of his typical business suits, well-made but not flashy. Despite being one of the richest men in the country, he had never been one for status symbols. His watch was expensive but understated, his shoes polished but not designer-labeled. Like Maria, he believed that quality spoke for itself without needing to shout. They took James's car, a practical electric sedan, rather than one of the sports cars he could easily afford, and arrived at Le Prestige precisely on time for their 7 reservation. The moment they walked through the door, Maria could see the difference in how they were received. The maitre d', Philippe from the previous night, practically leaped to attention when he saw James. Mr. Chen, we are honored to have you joining us this evening. Mr. Dumont is expecting you. If Philippe recognized Maria, he gave no indication of it. His eyes slid past her as if she were merely an accessory to the important man beside her. James, who hadn't been briefed on the details of Maria's experience, simply nodded politely. Thank you. This is my wife, Maria. Philippe bowed slightly. Madame, welcome to Le Prestige. They were escorted not to the main dining room but to a private area in the back, clearly the most exclusive section of the restaurant. The table was elegantly set with fine china, crystal glasses, and fresh flowers. A bottle of champagne was already chilling in an ice bucket beside the table. Antoine Dumont was waiting for them, his smile broad and his hand extended to James. Mr. Chen, it is such an honor to finally meet you in person. I cannot tell you how much I've been looking forward to this evening. James shook his hand firmly. Mr. Dumont, thank you for having us. He turned slightly. This is my wife, Maria. Antoine turned to her, his professional smile firmly in place. Then as recognition slowly dawned in his eyes, the smile froze. For a split second, Maria could see pure panic flash across his face before he regained his composure. Mrs. Chen, he said, his voice only slightly strained. How wonderful to meet you. Maria smiled pleasantly and extended her hand. Actually, we met last night, Mr. Dumont, though I was using my maiden name, Wang. I was seated by the kitchen, if you recall. The color drained from Antoine's face. His eyes darted to James, clearly trying to gauge whether the billionaire knew how his wife had been treated in this very restaurant less than 24 hours ago. James, picking up on the tension but not yet understanding its source, looked between them with curiosity. You've been here before, Maria? Just last night, dear, Maria replied calmly. I wanted to try it before our meeting today. Mr. Dumont runs quite an interesting establishment. Antoine seemed to be having trouble breathing. There must have been some confusion last night. Had you known I was married to a billionaire, you would have treated me differently. Maria finished for him, her voice still pleasant but firm. That's precisely the problem, isn't it? James was beginning to understand the situation. His expression hardened slightly as he looked at Antoine. Is there something I should know about my wife's experience here? Before Antoine could respond, the door to the private dining room opened and a server entered, Lisa from the night before. She stopped short when she saw Maria, surprise and then pleasure crossing her face. Mrs. Wang. She looked confused as she glanced between Maria and the men. It's Mrs. Chen, actually, Maria said kindly. But you can still call me Maria. Lisa nodded, still looking uncertain. I brought the wine selection Mr. Dumont requested for tonight's dinner. Antoine, clearly desperate to change the subject, seized on this. Yes, I've selected some exceptional vintages to complement Chef Roland's special menu tonight. If you'd like to begin with the champagne, James held up a hand. Before we get to that, I'd like to understand what happened when my wife dined here last night. The room fell silent. Antoine looked like he might faint. Lisa glanced nervously between everyone, clutching the wine list to her chest. Maria decided to take pity on them all. Lisa was lovely, she said to James. She provided excellent service despite certain obstacles. She gave Antoine a pointed look. Lisa blushed at the praise but looked relieved. Antoine's expression was a mix of gratitude for Maria's restraint and lingering terror about how this might affect the multi-million-dollar deal he was hoping to secure. Perhaps, Maria continued smoothly, Lisa could give us a moment to discuss this privately before we proceed with dinner. Lisa nodded quickly and exited, closing the door behind her. James turned his full attention to Antoine, who was now perspiring visibly. Mr. Dumont, James said, his voice deceptively calm, I think you should tell me exactly how my wife was treated in your restaurant last night. Antoine loosened his collar with one finger. The evening was clearly not going as he had planned, and as Maria watched him struggle to find the right words, she felt no satisfaction in his discomfort, only a quiet hope that perhaps this experience might lead to some meaningful reflection. Antoine dabbed at his forehead with a napkin. His usual confidence completely evaporated. Mr. Chen, please understand. We were extremely busy last night and there might have been some misunderstandings with service. James looked unconvinced. I'd like to hear specifics, Mr. Dumont. Antoine glanced at Maria, clearly hoping for some help, but she simply waited with polite interest. There would be no rescue from that quarter. Your wife, Mrs. Chen, came in without a reservation. I called ahead, Maria corrected gently, and waited 20 minutes for a table despite having a confirmed reservation. Antoine swallowed hard. There must have been a mix-up with the booking system, and regarding the table location, we simply had no better options available at that time. James turned to Maria. Where were you seated? Right beside the kitchen doors, she replied. Despite the restaurant being half empty when I arrived, James raised an eyebrow at Antoine, who was now turning a concerning shade of red. And the service? James prompted. Before Antoine could respond, Maria added, My appetizer took 20 minutes to arrive. My main course came 40 minutes later and was cold. Multiple tables seated after me received their food much more quickly. Antoine was now openly sweating. This is highly unusual for our establishment. We pride ourselves on excellent service for all our guests. All your guests? James asked pointedly. Or just the ones you deem important? The door opened again and Chef Roland entered carrying a tray of elegant amuse-bouches. He stopped short when he sensed the tension in the room. Perhaps this isn't a good time, he asked, looking uncertainly at Antoine. It's the perfect time, James said, gesturing for the chef to stay. I'd like to understand how your restaurant operates, particularly regarding customer treatment. Chef Roland looked confused. Antoine quickly made introductions, his voice strained. Chef, this is Mr. James Chen and his wife, Mrs. Chen. The chef nodded politely, but it was clear the names meant nothing to him. Unlike Antoine, he wasn't involved in the business side of the restaurant. Mrs. Chen dined with us last night, Antoine explained, choosing his words carefully. There seems to have been some issues with her experience. The chef's face showed genuine concern. I'm very sorry to hear that. Was there a problem with the food? The food was excellent, Maria assured him. When it finally arrived and despite being served cold, recognition dawned on the chef's face. You were at table 14? By the kitchen? Maria nodded, surprised he remembered. The chef turned to Antoine, his expression suddenly cooler. That was the solo diner you told us not to prioritize? The one you said wasn't worth the special attention? Antoine's face went from red to white in an instant. James's expression hardened. The chef turned back to Maria. I sincerely apologize, madame. I prepare each dish with care, regardless of who's eating it. Had I known your food was being delayed or served improperly, Maria smiled at him. I could tell the cooking was skillful. That's why I mentioned it to Mr. Dumont on my way out. The chef nodded in acknowledgement, then placed the tray on the table with a decidedly less ceremonial manner than he'd likely planned. I'll leave you to your discussion, he said, shooting a disapproving look at Antoine before departing. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Antoine looked like a man watching his dreams crumble before his eyes. The expansion deal with James's investment group would have made him a wealthy man and a national restaurant figure. James broke the silence. Mr. Dumont, I believe I understand the situation now. Antoine straightened, an air of desperate hope in his expression. Mr. Chen, I cannot apologize enough for this unfortunate incident. If you'll allow me to make it up to you both, James held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. I've built my company on two core principles, Mr. Dumont: innovation and integrity. I expect the same from anyone I do business with. Of course, Antoine agreed quickly. I assure you, Le Prestige upholds the highest standards of... What happened to my wife last night suggests otherwise. James interrupted, his voice calm but firm. It suggests you judge people's worth by their appearance or perceived status, rather than treating everyone with basic respect and dignity. Antoine seemed to shrink under James's gaze. It was an isolated incident, I assure you, was it? James asked. Lisa, the server from last night, seemed to suggest otherwise. And your chef's reaction just now indicates this is your standard operating procedure. Maria watched her husband with quiet pride. This was why she loved him. Despite all his wealth and success, he had never lost sight of what truly mattered: how people treated one another. Antoine was beginning to realize the severity of the situation. Mr. Chen, please. This deal means everything to my business. I've been working toward this expansion for years. James looked thoughtful. I don't doubt your ambition or your chef's talents. But I question your values, Mr. Dumont. And values matter to me more than profit margins. The door opened again and Lisa entered with a bottle of wine. She looked hesitant, clearly sensing she was interrupting something important. I'm sorry, should I come back later? James smiled at her. Actually, your timing is perfect. I have a few questions if you don't mind. Antoine looked panicked but couldn't very well object. Lisa approached the table, her expression cautious. Lisa, James began, my wife tells me you provided excellent service last night despite challenges. Is that typical of how your restaurant operates? Being told to prioritize certain guests over others? Lisa glanced nervously at Antoine, who was silently pleading with his eyes. The truth, please, James added gently. No one's job is at risk here. Lisa took a deep breath. Yes, sir. We're instructed to focus our attention on VIP tables. Critics, celebrities, big spenders. We call it service prioritization, but it means some people get poor service deliberately. James finished for her. Lisa nodded, not meeting Antoine's eyes. Not all of us agree with it. We became servers because we enjoy taking care of people, all people. James nodded. Thank you for your honesty. Antoine finally found his voice again. Mr. Chen, please understand. This is standard practice in high-end restaurants. We have limited resources and must allocate them strategically. Is that what you call it? James asked. Strategy? Interesting. I call it discrimination. Maria, who had been quiet during this exchange, finally spoke up. I think what's most troubling isn't that I received poor service, but that it was deliberate. That you have a system designed to determine who deserves respect and who doesn't. Antoine had no response to that. The truth of her words hung in the air between them. James turned to Maria. What do you think, dear? Should we continue with this dinner meeting? With this potential business relationship? Maria considered the question carefully. She could see Antoine was hanging on her response, probably assuming she would want revenge for her treatment. I think, she said slowly, that people deserve second chances, but only if they recognize their mistakes and genuinely want to do better. She looked directly at Antoine. The question is whether Mr. Dumont sees this as a real problem to fix, or merely an unfortunate circumstance of being caught treating the wrong person poorly. Antoine opened and closed his mouth several times before finding words. I never considered it that way before. We've always focused on pleasing the people who could help our business grow. The critics, the influencers, the wealthy, and everyone else? Maria prompted. Antoine had the grace to look ashamed. Was secondary. James nodded, seemingly satisfied with this honesty, however belated. At least that's truthful. He glanced at his watch. I suggest we table our business discussion for tonight. I need to reconsider whether this partnership aligns with our investment criteria. Antoine looked devastated but nodded in understanding. Of course. I completely understand. James stood and Maria followed suit. We'll be in touch, Mr. Dumont. In the meantime, I suggest you take a hard look at how your restaurant operates. As they prepared to leave, Lisa, who had been standing quietly to the side, stepped forward. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, if I may, despite what happened, this really is a good restaurant at its core. Chef Roland is talented and most of the staff truly care about food and service. Maria smiled warmly at her. I believe that. And thank you again for your kindness last night. James reached into his pocket and handed Lisa his business card. If you're ever looking for a change, my company is always hiring people with integrity. Those are surprisingly hard to find. Lisa accepted the card with wide eyes, recognizing the logo of James's world-famous tech company. Thank you, sir. As James and Maria walked out through the main dining room, they could feel the eyes of the staff and other diners on them. Word had clearly spread about who they were and the confrontation in the private dining room. In the car, Maria turned to James. You're not really going to cancel the deal, are you? You've been working on this restaurant expansion project for months. James smiled as he started the engine. That depends. On what? On whether Antoine Dumont is capable of change, James replied. And that, my dear, is something we'll have to wait and see about. 3 weeks passed with no word from James's investment team to Antoine Dumont. The restaurant owner had called multiple times, leaving increasingly desperate messages. But James had instructed his assistant to simply say the matter was still under review. On a sunny Tuesday morning, Maria was volunteering at the community center in a struggling neighborhood across town. Twice a week, she taught cooking classes to teenagers and young adults, helping them learn skills that could lead to jobs in the food industry. She had started the program 5 years ago with her own money, never using James's name or connections to get it off the ground. That's it, Vicky. Fold it gently, Maria encouraged a young woman who was carefully incorporating whipped egg whites into a chocolate batter. You want to keep all that air in there. Around the large industrial kitchen, 12 students were working at various stations, all focused on their tasks. Maria moved among them, offering advice and encouragement. These young people were her pride and joy. Many of them had come from difficult backgrounds, some had been homeless, others had dropped out of school. But in this kitchen they found purpose and community. The door to the kitchen swung open and the center's director, Paul, poked his head in. Maria, there's someone here to see you. Maria wiped her hands on her apron. Can it wait until after class? We're in the middle of soufflé day. Paul looked uncertain. He says it's important. Something about a restaurant? Curious, Maria asked one of her assistant teachers to take over and followed Paul to the reception area. To her complete surprise, Antoine Dumont was standing there, looking decidedly uncomfortable in his expensive suit among the community center's worn furniture and handmade decorations. "Mr. Dumont," Maria said, genuinely puzzled. "This is unexpected." Antoine shifted his weight nervously. "Mrs. Chen, thank you for seeing me. I know this is unusual. How did you find me here?" Maria asked. She had always kept her volunteer work separate from her life as James Chen's wife. "Your husband's assistant mentioned you might be here today," Antoine admitted. "I've been trying to reach Mr. Chen for weeks with no success. I thought perhaps if I spoke with you." Maria studied him carefully. "If you're hoping I'll influence my husband's business decision, I'm afraid you've wasted a trip." "James makes his own choices." Antoine shook his head. "That's not why I came, at least not entirely." He glanced around at the bustling community center. "Is there somewhere we could talk privately?" Maria led him to a small office off the main hallway. The space was simple: a desk, 2 chairs, and walls covered with children's artwork and thank you cards from previous students. "What can I do for you, Mr. Dumont?" Maria asked once they were seated. Antoine took a deep breath. "First, I want to apologize. Truly apologize for how you were treated at Le Prestige. There's no excuse for it." Maria nodded but remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "After you and your husband left that night, I couldn't sleep," Antoine admitted. "I kept thinking about what you said, about whether I saw this as a real problem or just an unfortunate circumstance of treating the wrong person poorly." He looked down at his hands. "The truth is, I'd never questioned our approach before. In the restaurant business, especially at the high end, it's standard practice to prioritize certain guests." "To discriminate," Maria said softly. Antoine winced but nodded. "Yes, and I convinced myself it was just good business. That we had to focus on the people who could elevate our reputation or bring in more money. And now?" Maria prompted. "Now I realize how wrong that was," Antoine said, meeting her eyes directly for the first time. "Not just because it cost me the biggest business opportunity of my career, but because you were right. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of who they are or what they're wearing or how much they're spending." Maria was surprised by his apparent sincerity, but remained cautious. "That's a significant realization, Mr. Dumont. It's changed everything," he said. "I've completely restructured how we operate at Le Prestige. No more VIP tables or service prioritization. Every guest gets our best every time. And your staff? How did they take these changes?" Maria asked. A small smile appeared on Antoine's face. "Most of them were relieved, honestly. Turns out most people who go into the service industry actually want to, serve people, not just cater to the elite. And Chef Roland, he threatened to quit if I didn't change things," Antoine admitted with a rueful laugh. "Said he couldn't work somewhere that disrespected his food by serving it cold or making people wait unnecessarily. He was quite passionate about it." Maria smiled at that. "I'm glad to hear it." Antoine hesitated, then pulled a folder from his jacket. "The reason I came today, I wanted to show you this. It's my new business plan. The one I'm hoping will convince your husband to reconsider the investment deal." He handed Maria the folder. Inside was a detailed proposal, but what caught her eye was the title: Community Culinary Initiative, Bringing Fine Dining Skills to Underserved Neighborhoods. Maria looked up in surprise. "What is this?" "After what happened, I started thinking about restaurant culture as a whole," Antoine explained. "About how exclusive and elitist it can be. This plan still includes the restaurant expansion, but with a twist. Each location would partner with local community organizations to offer training programs, apprenticeships, and job opportunities for people who might not otherwise have access to the fine dining world." Maria flipped through the pages, genuinely intrigued. "This is not what I expected." "I thought about what you said about second chances," Antoine continued, "and I realized that if I wanted one, I needed to demonstrate that I truly understood what was wrong with my approach. It couldn't just be about changing policies at Le Prestige. It had to be about changing the culture." He gestured to the community center around them. "When Mr. Chen's assistant mentioned your work here, it seemed like fate. This is exactly the kind of program I'm proposing to implement alongside our restaurants." Maria studied him carefully. "And if there was no investment deal on the line?" Would you still be interested in this approach? Antoine nodded without hesitation. Yes. In fact, I've already started a pilot program at Le Prestige. We've taken on 3 interns from the culinary program at the community college, all on full scholarships. They're working directly with Chef Roland. Maria closed the folder and handed it back to him. I'm impressed, Mr. Dumont. This shows real thought and commitment to change. Thank you, he said, looking relieved. Do you think... Would Mr. Chen be willing to look at this proposal? I understand if the answer is no, but I had to try. Maria considered for a moment. I'll make sure he sees it. That's all I can promise. Antoine nodded, accepting this. Thank you. That's more than fair. He stood to leave, then paused. I almost forgot. There's someone else who wanted to see you. He opened the office door and gestured. A moment later, Lisa, the server from Le Prestige, entered the room. Lisa, Maria said, surprised and pleased. How are you? Lisa smiled warmly. I'm good, Mrs. Chen, really good, actually. I wanted to thank you in person. Thank me? For what? Your husband called me the day after your dinner, Lisa explained. He offered me a position coordinating the employee cafeteria at his company headquarters. The salary is twice what I made at Le Prestige, plus benefits. Maria smiled. That sounds like James. I start next week, Lisa continued excitedly. But Mr. Dumont asked if I would help with his new community program first, to get it off the ground. I said yes, as long as I could talk to you about it too. Maria looked between them, sensing there was more to this story. Antoine explained. Lisa has been instrumental in redesigning our service approach. And she suggested we reach out to programs like yours to find candidates for our training initiative. We thought, Lisa added, if you were willing, your students here might be interested in some of the positions. Professional training with Chef Roland would be an amazing opportunity for them. Maria felt a surge of emotion. This was beyond anything she had expected when Antoine had appeared at the community center. I think they would be very interested, she managed. After Lisa and Antoine left, promising to be in touch about the potential partnership, Maria immediately called James. You'll never guess who just visited me at the center, she said when he answered. By the smile in your voice. I'm guessing it wasn't an unhappy student, James replied. Maria recounted the entire conversation, including the new business proposal and the community initiative. Do you believe him? James asked when she finished. Do you think he's really changed, or is this just an elaborate attempt to save the deal? Maria thought about Antoine's demeanor, the detailed plans, and most tellingly, his willingness to work with Lisa on restructuring his restaurant's approach. I think, she said slowly, that he had a genuine wake-up call. Whether it lasts remains to be seen, but I believe he deserves that second chance we talked about. 6 months later, Maria stood proudly in the kitchen of Le Prestige, watching as 3 of her former students, now in professional chef's whites, worked confidently alongside Chef Roland. The restaurant's first community culinary graduation ceremony was about to begin in the main dining room, where families, friends, and local media had gathered. James appeared at her side, slipping an arm around her waist. Happy? Very, she said, leaning into him. Look at them. 6 months ago, they were learning basic knife skills in our community kitchen. Now they're preparing food in one of the top restaurants in the city. All because you ordered duck breast at the right place at the wrong time, James mused. Antoine approached them, looking considerably less stressed than the last time they'd met. The investment deal had gone through 3 months ago, with the community initiative as a central component. Already 2 new Le Prestige locations were under construction in other cities, each with training programs built into their business models. We're ready to begin the ceremony, Antoine told them. And may I say again how grateful I am for your faith in this project, Mr. Chen? James shook his head. Thank my wife. She's the one who saw potential where I only saw a problem. As they walked toward the dining room, Maria reflected on how a simple dinner and a case of mistaken judgment had led to something so meaningful. Sometimes the worst experiences led to the best outcomes, but only if people were willing to learn, grow, and change. In the end, it wasn't about revenge or comeuppance. It was about transformation, not just of Antoine and his restaurant, but of opportunities for young people who might otherwise never have found their way into the culinary world. That, Maria thought as she watched the proud faces of her former students, was worth far more than any momentary satisfaction of putting someone in their place. It was about creating lasting change, one person, one chance, one meal at a time.